In 1992, Clint Eastwood finished Unforgiven, the film that won him Best Picture and Best Director, and ended 40 years of argument about whether he was a serious filmmaker. After the last credit, one card came up on the screen, 4 words long, dedicated to Sergio and Don. Both men were dead. Neither of them ever saw it. 5 people shaped Clint Eastwood's life. 2 of their names are on that card. 2 more he named out loud, years apart, on nights when nobody made him. And one of the 5 he has spent 30 years refusing to talk about. These are the 5 people Clint Eastwood loved the most. Number 5. Sergio Leone. In 1964, Clint Eastwood was a nobody with a good jawline and a dying career. He'd spent 7 years on a television western called Rawhide, playing second lead to a bigger star, and Universal had already fired him once, telling him his Adam's apple stuck out too far and he'd never be a leading man.
He said to Clint, "You talk too slow, and you've got this chip on your tooth, which you refuse to get fixed, and your Adam's apple sticks out. I mean, it sticks way out here. You know, it's ridiculous. It's terrible." So I said, "I'm sorry, we have to let you go."
He was 34. Television actors did not become film stars in 1964. That road simply did not exist. Then, a letter arrived from Italy. An unknown director named Sergio Leone wanted him for a low-budget western shooting in the Spanish desert, an unofficial remake of a Japanese samurai film financed on scraps. The fee was $15,000.
The Italian cinema is very poor. We got Clint for $15,000.
Every serious American actor Leone approached had turned it down. Eastwood said yes, and it rewrote his life. The 2 men could barely speak to each other. Leone's English was almost non-existent, and Eastwood spoke no Italian, so Leone directed him by performing, physically acting out what he wanted, scene by scene, in front of his own camera.
Whatever language they spoke, they spoke. They didn't care if there were extraneous noises. Like you say, oh, the camera is making a little noise. They didn't care about that, just as long as the picture was clear.
Photographs from that shoot, unpublished for decades, show Leone miming the movements while Eastwood watches. In one of them, you can see the frustration on Eastwood's face, a man trying to understand a director he couldn't hold a conversation with. What came out of it was the most famous character of Eastwood's life. Leone dressed him in a filthy poncho, put a cigar in his mouth, took away most of his dialogue, and built the man with no name around what was left. By the time the trilogy ended, a fired television actor had become one of the most recognizable faces on the planet.
Eastwood didn't smoke, but he did favor those little dark, smelly cigars. That and the squint in the Spanish sun and his extraordinary face created a kind of icon.
Their relationship was never simple. Eastwood eventually walked away from the character to build a career on his own terms, and Leone took it personally. In a 1984 interview, 20 years after he'd made him a star, Leone was still comparing Eastwood unfavorably to Robert De Niro, saying that what he'd originally seen in Eastwood was a block of marble. It was a cold thing to say about the man who'd carried 3 of his films. They never worked together again. Leone died in 1989, and as far as the public record shows, they never repaired it. Years later, asked about that period, Eastwood put it in his own plain way.
What would you tell Sergio if he was here today?
Thanks for the memory.
As much as he enjoyed Sergio, he said, and as much as it was a great time in his life, it came time to do something else. That's about as warm as Clint Eastwood gets on the record, and it's aimed at a man who'd publicly called him a slab of stone. Then he made Unforgiven and put Leone's name on the end of it. Sergio Leone had been dead 3 years. He never saw it. Eastwood put his name on the masterpiece anyway, permanently. In the credits of the film he'd be remembered for. Whatever had gone wrong between them, whatever insults sat unanswered, Eastwood made sure that anyone watching his greatest work would know who helped make him. That was Eastwood's way of saying something he'd never say out loud. And the second name on that card belonged to a man almost nobody outside the industry has heard of. Number 4. Don Siegel. Don Siegel was a working director, fast and unsentimental, the kind who came in under budget and made hard little films that hit harder than their price tags suggested.
Don was probably the best B-movie maker in the world. He could take the least amount and do the most with it.
In 1968, he directed Eastwood in Coogan's Bluff, and over the next 11 years, the 2 of them made 5 films together. One of them was Dirty Harry, which turned Eastwood from a Western star into the biggest box office draw in America.
And the idea was that Dirty Harry was supposed to be an outsider, that he was supposed to be a loner, you know, that didn't really have any relationships with women other than hookers or something like that.
The 5 films are the smaller half of what Siegel gave him. By 1970, Eastwood had an idea he couldn't shake. He wanted to direct. He had a script called Play Misty for Me, a small thriller about a disc jockey and an obsessive fan, and he wanted to make it himself. Nobody in Hollywood was waiting for Clint Eastwood, the director. He was a movie star with a squint and a gun, and the town had him filed under exactly that. So he brought the script to Siegel and asked him to read it. Siegel read it and gave him an answer Eastwood repeated for the rest of his life.
When I went to him in 1970 and told him that I had this little project that I wanted to direct, he said, "Oh, by all means." He said, "Let me support you on that and let me sign your Directors Guild of America card and all that sort of thing."
He told him he should direct it himself and then offered to be the first person to sign his application to the Directors Guild. That is the entire hinge of Clint Eastwood's second career, and it happened in a conversation between 2 friends. Eastwood took the deal that came with it, and the deal was brutal. Universal agreed to let him direct only if he worked for Guild minimum, a fraction of what he earned as an actor. His own agent argued against it. Eastwood took it anyway and made the film for under $1 million because the point was never the money. He needed to prove he could do it.
Lenny said, "Well, let me go back and get just a percentage of the gross profits of the film, and we won't ask for anything." And I said, "That's fine by me." Turned out to be a good choice, but at the same time, I would have done it for nothing. I think most people who really want to do something badly will do that.
Siegel showed up in the finished film too, playing a bartender. The mentor stood in front of the camera while the student stood behind it for the first time. What Siegel gave him went far past that one film. The speed, the economy, the refusal to shoot a scene 40 times, looking for something that was already there. All of it became the Eastwood method for the next 50 years and 40 films. And Siegel's voice stayed in his head long after he was gone. In 1991, Siegel died at 78. A year later, Eastwood was preparing Unforgiven, and he started rewriting the script, adding things, improving it the way directors do. Then he stopped. He remembered something Siegel used to say, that you could ruin a good piece of material by improving it to death. Eastwood threw out most of his own changes and shot it close to the way it was written. That film won Best Picture and Best Director.
And the Oscar goes to Clint Eastwood for Unforgiven.
It's the one he'll be remembered for, and the man whose advice shaped it had been dead for over a year when the cameras rolled. So when the credits came up and the card read, "Dedicated to Sergio and Don," Eastwood was naming the 2 men who built him. One gave him the face the world knew, the other gave him the career that outlasted it. Both of them were gone before he could show them what it all became. One person saw all of it, from long before anyone in Hollywood knew his name. Number 3, Ruth Wood. On March 29, 1993, Clint Eastwood stood on the stage of the Dorothy Chandler Pavilion holding the Oscar for Best Picture.
And the Oscar for the Best Picture of 1992 goes to Clint Eastwood.
He was 62 years old. He had been in the business for nearly 40 years, and for most of that time, the Academy had treated him as a commercial product rather than a serious artist, a man who shot people on screen and sold tickets. Unforgiven changed that in one night. He'd finally won, and the whole industry was watching to see what he'd say. He talked about the film for a moment, then he pointed into the audience. "In the year of the woman," he said, "the greatest woman on the planet is here tonight, and that's my mother, Ruth."
In the year of the woman, the greatest woman on the planet is here tonight. That's my mother, Ruth.
Ruth Wood was 84 years old, sitting in the crowd, watching her son collect the biggest prize in American film. Of all the people he could have singled out at the highest point of his professional life, he chose her, in front of 1 billion people, using language he almost never used about anyone. She'd been there from the very beginning.
His mom had a job as well, but it was sort of like, because her kids were in school and she was sort of a go-getter, that was her nature.
She raised him through the Depression, moving from town to town while his father chased work, and she was the one who brought music into the house. Eastwood remembered her coming home with Fats Waller records the day Waller died. That was the start of a jazz obsession that ran through the rest of his life, and eventually through the scores of his own films. That thread ran further than she ever knew. The boy who grew up hearing Fats Waller records in a rented house passed the same thing straight down to his own son. Kyle Eastwood was 8 years old when his father took him to the Monterey Jazz Festival and stood him in front of Dizzy Gillespie, Sarah Vaughan, and the Count Basie Orchestra.
Both my mom and my dad are big fans of jazz, and that was sort of the music they were always listening to. There was always a lot of music in the house, growing up for me. So
Clint taught him the first thing he ever learned on a piano. Kyle grew up to become a working jazz musician, and eventually he wrote music for his father's films, including Letters from Iwo Jima and Gran Torino. On one of Kyle's own records, you can hear Clint whistling. Ruth brought the music into the house. 60 years later, her son was still handing it forward. His daughter Allison went into the business too, as an actor and later a director. In 2018, she came out of acting retirement for one specific reason: to play Clint Eastwood's estranged daughter in The Mule, a film he directed and starred in.
What was it like to watch your father take on that mantle of this rather eccentric character?
I was really surprised that he was going to play somebody that was going to be driving around with a bunch of blow in the back of his truck. But, it's obviously not just about that.
A real father and a real daughter, performing a fictional version of a father and daughter who'd lost each other. The advice he'd given all of his children was 4 words long: whatever you do, do it well. None of it faded with age. In 2003, a writer from The New Yorker spent time with Eastwood at home. He was 72 years old, one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, directing constantly. He mentioned, in passing, that he and his mother spoke on the phone every single night. She was 94. He'd taken her to dinner the night before. During the visit, Ruth sat in the kitchen with 3 generations of Eastwoods around her, remembering how obsessed he'd been with snakes as a little boy. A man who built a career playing characters with no families kept calling his mother every night for decades. Then, in February of 2005, it happened again. $1 Million Baby won him Best Director, his second, and Eastwood stood on that stage a second time.
And the Oscar goes to Clint Eastwood for $1 Million Baby.
He noted that his mother had been there in 1993 when she was 84, and that she was there again now. Then he said he was thanking her for her genes. She was 96 years old and sitting in the audience at the Oscars for the second time to watch her son win. He thanked his wife that night too, Dina Ruiz, and called her his best pal.
Thank you. I'd like to thank my wife, who's my best pal down here.
They'd married in 1996. 9 years after that speech, the marriage was over. His mother was the one constant in the room across both of those nights. Ruth died the following February in Carmel Valley at 97. She'd lived long enough to see him honored twice at the summit of the industry, and both times he made sure the room knew she was there. Twice in 12 years, on the 2 biggest nights of his professional life, the most famously unsentimental man in Hollywood turned the spotlight around and aimed it at his mother. The next name on this list got no Oscar speech and no public tribute. What she got was 13 years, 6 films, and a decade in court. Number 2, Sondra Locke. In 1975, Clint Eastwood was casting a Western called The Outlaw Josie Wales, and a 31-year-old actress named Sondra Locke came in to read. Locke arrived with a real pedigree. She'd been nominated for an Academy Award at 22 for her very first film, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, and she'd spent the years since trying to build on a start that good. She got the part.
You see him?
What?
Clouds over there.
And by the time the film wrapped, something had started between them that would run for the next 13 years. What followed was the most productive stretch of Clint Eastwood's life, and she was in the middle of all of it. They made 6 films together: The Gauntlet, Every Which Way But Loose, Bronco Billy, Any Which Way You Can, Sudden Impact.
Clint Eastwood has directed Sondra Locke now in, I think, 4 motion pictures. She's becoming quite an actress.
Well, she always was a very good actress.
Through the back half of the 70s and into the 80s, when Eastwood was the biggest star on earth, Sondra Locke was the woman standing beside him on screen and off it. He was still legally married to his first wife. She was still legally married to a man she'd been close to since childhood. Neither of those arrangements stopped it. For 13 years, they shared a house in Bel Air and a life the whole industry knew about. 6 movies, more than a decade. No other relationship in Eastwood's life produced anything close to that much shared work. Then it ended, and it ended badly enough to reshape both of them. In the spring of 1989, while Locke was away directing a film called Impulse, she came home to find the locks on the Bel Air house had been changed and her belongings put into storage.
She was locked out of the house that she had basically chosen and built and designed,
She filed suit within days. What came next ran through the courts for the better part of a decade and included allegations from Locke that Eastwood strenuously denied, along with a second lawsuit over a Warner Brothers development deal that Locke argued had been designed to look like a career while producing nothing.
And it turned out that the settlement was part of a fraud between him and Warner Brothers.
That case settled in 1996, while the jury was still deliberating. The appellate ruling from the related litigation is still taught in law schools today. Both of them spent years in courtrooms over a relationship that had started on a movie set. Locke wrote a memoir in 1997 and called it The Good, the Bad, and the Very Ugly. She died in November of 2018 at 74, and by then the two of them hadn't spoken publicly about each other in a very long time.
Oscar-nominated actress Sondra Locke died at age 74. About 6 weeks ago, on November 3rd, Locke died due to a heart attack.
She is the one he has never talked about. He put 2 dead directors in his credits. He pointed at his mother from an Oscar stage in front of 1 billion people, twice. For Sondra Locke, there is no card, no speech, no line in an interview. 13 years, 6 films, a shared house, and 30 years of silence since. That silence is why she belongs on this list. 13 years and 6 films is a marriage in everything except paperwork. She was there for Bronco Billy, which he said is one of his personal favorites of everything he ever made.
Bronco Billy becomes another aspect of my life that I've always attracted to.
She was there through the run of movies that turned him from a star into an institution. Whatever happened at the end, and however you judge who was right about what, the record of the work is permanent and it's enormous. Some relationships shape a person by lasting. This one shaped him by how it broke, and it left marks the 2 Oscars never covered over. There's a reason this story is built out of dedications, Oscar speeches, and courtroom records, instead of quotes. In June of 2025, an interview went around the world in which Clint Eastwood supposedly opened up about his life and his regrets. It spread everywhere. Millions of people read it. Then Eastwood, who almost never responds to anything, put out a statement calling the whole thing phony. He'd never given it. Somebody had written it and put his name on top. That is how carefully this man guards what he actually says, which is what makes the last name on this list land the way it does. Because when he finally said something, it was 13 words long. Number 1, Christina Sandera. Christina Sandera worked at the Mission Ranch Hotel in Carmel, a property Eastwood had bought back in the 1980s to keep it from being torn down and turned into condominiums. She had no career in the film business, no ambitions in it, and no interest in being seen. That's how they met, sometime around 2014, when he was 84 years old. Look at where he was in his life when she showed up. He'd been married twice. The second marriage, to Dina Ruiz, ended in divorce that same year.
Clint Eastwood is single again. The 84-year-old film icon and his wife Dina are officially divorced after 18 years of marriage.
He had 8 children by 6 different women. He'd spent decades in gossip columns, in courtrooms, in the middle of the loudest and most public romantic wreckage in Hollywood. He was in his mid-80s, with every award, every dollar, and every honor the industry had to give. And behind him sat 60 years of noise. Then came a woman who wanted absolutely none of it. They were together roughly 10 years, and in that entire decade, you can count her public appearances on your hands. She went with him to the Oscars in 2015.
Right there, please. Hold on, one photo, please, Rose, one photo.
She turned up at premieres for Sully, for The Mule, for Richard Jewell. She stood next to him, smiled, and said nothing to the press. There were no interviews, no magazine spreads, no attempts to build anything out of proximity to Clint Eastwood. For a man whose romantic life had been picked apart in public since the 1970s, that quiet must have been worth more than anything else she could have given him. Then, on July 18, 2024, Christina Sandera died. She was 61 years old.
Clint Eastwood's longtime girlfriend, Christina Sandera, has died. She was 61 years old.
Eastwood was 94. He had spent his entire adult life refusing to talk about his private relationships. Reporters had asked him about women for 50 years and gotten nothing back. This time, he released a statement, and it was 2 lines long. Christina was a lovely, caring woman, he said, and I will miss her very much.
Clint previously confirmed her passing in a statement to The Hollywood Reporter July 19th, telling the outlet, "Christina was a loving, caring woman. I will miss her very much."
That's it. That's the whole thing. 13 words. From the actor who built a career out of never explaining himself. The man who played characters that walk out of town without a word to anybody. Getting 13 words of open grief out of Clint Eastwood is like getting a speech out of anyone else. She gave him 10 quiet years at the end of a very loud life. And when she died, he told the world he'd miss her. That's why she's #1. Sergio Leone made him a star. Don Siegel made him a director. Ruth gave him the beginning and stayed until she was 97. Sondra Locke gave him 13 years and took 13 more in court. Christina Sandera gave him the one thing 60 years in Hollywood never did, which was quiet, at the only point in his life when he was old enough to know what it was worth. He put 2 dead men in the credits of his masterpiece. He pointed at his mother from the Oscar stage in front of 1 billion people twice. And at 94, he told the world in one short line that he would miss Christina Sandera, a man who spent 60 years playing characters who needed nobody, spent his real life shaped by 5 people he could never replace. So which one surprised you the most? The mentor he honored after that man had insulted him? The mother he called every night into her 90s? Or the quiet woman almost nobody knew about until she was gone? Tell me in the comments. And if you want more stories about the people behind the legends you grew up watching, subscribe. There's a new one every week.